Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Author of Your Own Story Show. I'm your host, Doug Holt, and I'm so excited to have Menachem Brodie here with me. Menachem has become a great friend and an amazing entrepreneur, as well as a strength and conditioning expert. And, I won't tell you too much about Menachem. I'll let you hear it directly from him. So, Menachem, thank you so much for being here.
Doug, thanks for having me on, man.
Oh, awesome. Absolutely. I've been excited about this. So tell us a little bit about your story and about your background for those that may not know you.
My story is like everybody's. My penultimate came when I read The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale at the age of 19. I got a massive speeding ticket, had 4 other people in the car with me. I was very fortunate that it was not worse. And my story is fitness. As a young kid, I was actually bullied a lot in school, especially at a younger age. I always was a little bit different. Not in the way of, I had my nose in a book, but I just saw the world a little bit differently. And in a good way. I recognize that now, but as, a 9, 10-year-old, you're getting picked on. You do what you need to on the playground to survive. And, it's been an interesting journey. My start in fitness started when I was suspended from school in 8th grade for getting into a fight. There was like a little group, a ring, if you will, that had been breaking into my locker. They figured out what my code was and broke into my locker. They cut the bottom of my backpack. They did a lot of different things. And I happened to go out to the bathroom one day and found somebody in my locker. And I got into a really big fight and I was suspended for 3 days. Wow. So, it actually started, I was at home. My parents had a long talk with me and I explained what happened. The principal at the time, Rabbi Isser Pleiner, was actually fantastic. Like when he sat with me individually, he understood everything completely. And he said, you're also guilty. So, justice, but balance was introduced early and with the right role models. But my story started with Get Fit with Gilad. And I've made a full circle. I moved to Tel Aviv, Israel about 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years on Christmas, actually. And I started working out at home. I started off in the 3rd floor of my parents' house in Pittsburgh, PA, freezing cold winter. And I was suspended. I didn't have suspended. I didn't have anything else to do. So I was flipping through. I was still allowed to watch TV. And that was it. So over the last 24, 25 years, I've been involved in fitness. And I started in Pittsburgh and started with cycling, started with strength and conditioning, basketball actually, worked for the Pitt basketball team. Was going down that track, was offered a job at Division I program, and eventually decided that I didn't want to work 80 hours a week. I wanted to have family time. I wanted to have a little bit better life balance and got into cycling. And that's brought me around the world, essentially. Wow, man, what a story. This is why I love interviewing friends, because I get to learn more things about you than I probably would have otherwise. Interesting. You've always saw those workout videos or those, shows on TV, but to see that it's made such an impact on you, coming full circle to being, one of the foremost strength and conditioning specialists in your field, is really remarkable. Yeah. It didn't hit me until about, I think it was April or May this year. I was in the gym. I went in for a lift and it happened to be that he was up on the screen, and it was literally like a ton of breaks. Like, holy cow, man. Like, that's how I got started. And the motivation he's giving you and he's talking to you. I remember like thinking like, oh, I can't do this. And just then he cued you. He's like, come on, I know it's hurting. You can keep. I'm like, wow, this guy's amazing. That was kind of a turn in, Awesome. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about your background too, as we go through it and talk about it, but you're really known for a number of things. Well, you're known for a lot. But one is strength and conditioning or fitness as it relates to AI, and then strength and conditioning online, and then also strength and conditioning as it relates to cyclists. Where do you find the time to do all of that, and where have your passions kind of gone? Great question. They all kind of converge. I start off understanding and reading the bodies. I was a kid. I remember, and I don't think my wife even knows this, but when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a hockey goalie at the age of 10, 11. And I would practice. I put the sofa cushions down on the floor and watch the Pittsburgh Penguins playing on TV. And I'd have a goalie stick that my mom bought me that wouldn't scuff the wooden floor. And I would have a tennis ball and I would, pretend to make the saves as they went. And pretty much my understanding of the human body kind of took me down into powerlifting at a young age. And from there, I was never the fastest or the strongest, but I was the most consistent. That was the one thing I could do, was consistency. And sure enough, I won my first powerlifting meet, barely. I forget I think at the Wilks equation, I won by like 1.2, which if you're familiar, like it's a small margin, over two friends of mine, two brothers who I wound up coaching on the bike, who are fantastic cyclists. And just, I was always looking into technology and trying to figure out, how do I do this? How can I use X to help me get better? So when I was younger, I actually printed off, this is the early years of the interwebs, I printed off a 12-week program to train to be a hockey goalie, and started following it. It included a heart rate monitor. I begged my parents to get me one. Never happened, but I would read. I kept reading about it, and that's what kind of got me into the technological side of things. As it pertains to cycling and triathlon, it was one of those things where I just wanted to learn more. When I was working for the Pitt basketball team, I needed another sport. I needed something else to do, because my passion of basketball was now an 80-hour-a-week job. And it was looking like, okay, strength training is great, but I'm tired. I want to get out, break away from the walls. I was, sitting in watching film. And just because I was so bad at cycling, I was the guy showing up to a road bike ride on the weekends, group ride on the mountain bike, and the last guy up the hills, the first guy down the bottom. And I just started reading. And that was something that was ingrained in me young. And that's kind of how they all converged. It was not the fastest or strongest, but the most consistent. How can I legally move myself forward and get better results? Then it was a matter of, I want to do another sport, but I don't know anything about it. And that's been a running theme. Eric Cressy talks about, he didn't know baseball, so he went and studied it. Lauren Landau, he was a bodybuilder, and he was interested in speed and MMA. He's like, I didn't know anything about MMA. The guy came and said, sure, I don't know anything about it. He was very honest, and he went out and just read and watched and learned. And that's kind of how I went as well.
Awesome. And so for someone listening to this, and maybe they're an aspiring, cyclist like you, like imagine, Menachem coming in, showing up to the weekend biking event. Now, are there ways that people can actually get better at biking rather than just getting on the bike and riding?
Yes. And a lot of it has to do, especially with endurance sports. We also have it in CrossFit. We always think that more is more. And it's the magic of addition by subtraction. So the big thing is, and we have a couple riders on the team I coach now that are, they asked me just the other week, I want to come earlier and stay later than the team practices. I'm like, actually, you should come early or come on time, get your warm up in, and you should be leaving early. They're like, well, why would I do that? Well, we have to think about the physiological system for the body. Is kind of like when you're building a business. There's 4 main pillars. You have a number of things going on the business side, but also on the body side. We'll focus on that. We have hormonal, cardiovascular, neuromuscular, as well as the metabolic systems. Those are the 4 pillars for athletic progression in any sport at all. All you have to do is look at the sport. What are the demands for each of these? And how can I improve myself? What type of stress do I need? And what type of recovery? And that's really what it comes down to. The fact that I was on a mountain bike for about 3.5 years because I couldn't afford a road bike was a huge curse at the time. That's how I felt, like, I just want to be faster. But it was also a blessing in that I had to figure out how to be smarter than the other guys. So it started with, the front fork locks out. Now it's easier to go uphill. And one of the guys happened to do it when I was inside for a rest break. And I was like, someone broke my bike. He's like, no, I just made you faster. But that's pretty much the long and short of it. Like, we can get into details about it, but look at anything you're trying to do. And success leaves clues, as Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn say. It's a matter of read the books, and figure out what works for you. And that was my problem early in my career, both for business and as an athlete, was I was so fixed on doing things the way that someone else had done them, like basketball. And when I tried out for the Pitt men's basketball team to walk on, the first year, the end of the first tryout, Barry Rorson actually said to me, why, in the middle of a drill, he's like, why are you trying to slide? You can't do it. Turn your legs and run with them. And it was like a whole new game opened. I was a good defender, and now I was a very good defender. So it's figuring out what works for everybody else and then what works for you. And be smart. Like, just because someone's fast or a good cyclist doesn't mean they know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, and that's one of the things we see in business. Like, how did you get 30,000 followers on Instagram? I don't know. I just took, you just do what I did, and you start doing it. And you're like, this is awful. Nothing's happening. I have 700 posts and 37 followers. Like, you gotta figure out who you are.
Don't make fun of my Instagram.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So there's a big controversy in cycling, as there are with other sports, and maybe you can talk about that, because I know there's several of our listeners are avid cyclists. To strength train or not to strength train?
Definitely strength train. It's something that Harvey Newton started changing back in the 80s, and he was way ahead of his time. Fantastic human being. I spoke to him because one of my clients actually knew him, a long-term client. It's going to be 11 years. Paul was he was number 2, and he's been with me for 11 years, 12 years. But the bottom line is that any sport that you're looking at, you need to have a better functioning organism as a whole. So we talked about the 4 pillars of athletic progression. I have a YouTube video, actually 27 minutes talking about that. But the thing is that you have to think about, when you look at the body as a whole, and this is why a lot of cyclists and runners have these overuse injuries, or they think it's a rite of passage that their back is bothering them or their knees bother them. The muscles are made to help support the structures to move. And a muscle has 3 jobs in the body. To protect a joint is number 1. To stabilize a joint while an adjacent joint moves is number 2. And the last one is to move a joint. So if you start thinking about the body in that order, it's a very clear as day picture as to why so many runners and cyclists have these aches and pains. They're doing these exercise activities over and over again, but they're not stressing the organism, the structures themselves, enough to actually be able to support what they're doing. And that's the key to longevity. There's a guy, Ben, he actually was a running back for Harvard or Yale. I can't remember. I always mixed it up and he got mad at me. He's like, no, that's not it. He was 88, 89. And he was still squatting 185 pounds for sets of 5. Quarter squats, mind you. But I mean, think about that. And his thing was, I always saw strength training. I never pushed myself to the point of pain, except for the burning. But I just knew, like, I come in regularly and I do enough. When my body says I'm done, my brain says I'm done, and my body's done. And that's kind of the key is the strength training. You have to have a strong enough metabolic system, hormonal system, neuromuscular system, and cardiovascular system. When all 4 of those combine, it's kind of like Captain Planet. Heart is missing. When your powers combine, then you have someone who's going to be active and running a marathon and setting records at 101, 105, 110 years old.
That's awesome. I'm a huge believer in strength training across all populations and sports and activities, just like you are. Now, when you're working with somebody, I know right now you're in Tel Aviv, right? And I know you work with people remotely. You're working with triathletes, cyclists, and the general population. Is that right? Through your different
Correct.
programs and things that you offer. When you're working with someone remotely, what are the things that you're looking for to develop that program?
It really depends on the individual. So I've actually been in contact with a very high-profile litigation lawyer. So we're finally going to talk tomorrow. But her needs are very different than Paul's needs, let's say. So both of them have very high-stress jobs. We have to take a step back and look at how are we going to use fitness or exercise to improve this person's life. So there's a book by Richard Sutton called The Stress Code. There's another subtitle to it. Someone told me there's like 3 The Stress Codes, but by Richard Sutton. And essentially what we're looking at, fitness and undertaking the pursuit of health. Health is not going to CrossFit. I mean, we see such a high, not to pick on CrossFit, I'm just using an example people are familiar with. Same with cycling, but the burnout rate is so high. Like, I worked with high level CrossFit athletes when I came to Israel. I actually coached the number 2 female in all of Israel. She finished second. She should have been first. It was the damn rope climb. We just didn't have the proper place to practice long enough. So she could rope climb, but not 40 feet. So it's really taking a step back and looking at, how does it fit into the person's life? What is it, a personality thing? So like a lot of the triathletes I take tend to be what I call type A-. They're very results oriented. They're very driven people, but they also understand how to take a step back and have the full perspective. But they're not going to take no for an answer unless it makes sense to them, but they're willing to listen and hear. Once you have that, it's a matter of figuring out, okay, someone wants to have X goal. Why? And it always comes back to why. And I believe it's Simon Sinek, The Power of Why. Ask why 7 times. When I first read the book, I was like, why? And people were like, is there something wrong with you? But you get a little bit more finesse when you start to understand what the true underlying drivers are for a human being, whether it's business, whether it's intellectually, whether it's fitness, relationships, or even for spiritual. You start to understand who they are at their core. And that's kind of, I think, the key that a lot of people miss. And I probably turn down about 75% of the people who come to me, triathletes in particular. I only carry 2 to 3 Ironman a year. And I have probably 7 to 9 come to me. Oh, I heard you're really good. I want to work with you. Well, let's talk. So it's understanding who you are, where you are in the cycle of things, but being able to listen and have a conversation. So those, I think, are the big keys. Same thing, Damien John, I think, for FUBU. Is that right?
Yep.
So he talks about it in his book. Escapes me right now the title, but he talks about in his book that he knew that this is what he wanted to do. Like that was what he wanted, and he wasn't going to give up. And he had tough days. He talks about living at home with mom. He knew, and driving in the middle of the night in Los Angeles, trying to track down the one celebrity that's at this after party and that after party. Sometimes you just know. And that's the same thing with fitness. And that tends to be the key for most people, is when you find that sport, you just know. Like I look forward to it. And that doesn't mean every day. We all have bad days. But you're laying in bed, you're like, oh yeah, this would be really great to have. And not just, oh, I want this bike or shoes. It's a matter of, I really enjoy the pursuit of, and what I'm becoming in the pursuit.
Yeah. And there's something that people forget. I remember I had a client that I was coaching, and he would laughingly, jokingly say, cyclists will spend thousands of dollars to shave an ounce of weight off of a bike. Yet most of them, the weekend guys, are carrying an extra 20 pounds of body fat and won't do anything with that. I always thought that was interesting and very appropriate, right? Because, it's easy to look at technology as the solution rather than actually doing the work. With your online programs, are you giving everybody a periodized workout? So in other words, are you customizing them and showing them exactly what they want, what they should be doing week to week?
Yeah. So there's actually 3 different levels or 3 different options. So I just launched 2 weeks ago the monthly membership program for triathletes and monthly membership program for cyclists. So that's someone who wants a little bit of a lower price point. These tend to be individuals in 30 to 45 range. Usually it's with kids in like middle school. So they're just busy enough, like you have to still chauffeur them around and you're involved enough, or those who are looking for a lower price point just due to budget. And what it is it's a dialed in for that specific sport to address most big issues, if you will. So we're looking at movement deficiencies. I don't like calling them anything besides deficiency, because it's just what we do every day. That's what the result of. And then there's the level of individualized. And I keep I keep a very low course or roster, because I want to make sure that there's that connection with each athlete. But the big thing is, and you kind of hit on it, is it's really a matter of what's important to you. And we all kind of get lost in that shiny new object. We just had in the WhatsApp group today for the cycling team, what wheels should I get? And of course, I go, oh, you should get the most aero. And he asked about a specific brand and called Shamal by Campagnola. I was like, actually, as a bigger rider, I love them. They cornered well. They put the power down. And he ultimately went with the aerodynamic one because that's what the consensus was. And we have to be smart enough to know, like, I want the individual, but I'm not really there yet. And I tell people I'm the worst salesman in the world, because if I hear that you actually need the monthly program, I'm going to sell you that because that's what you need, and has that rewarded my bank account? No. But the people get what they need and they enjoy it more. And to see people, and I try and coach people out of my ecosystem. My role is an Olympic cycle and out, not as a whole. Like I have Paul, 10, 12 years at this point, and he was also a great friend. So it's not a hard rule. It's not a blanket statement, but I try and get people the skills and tools that they need to understand themselves and their bodies enough mentally, physically, spiritually, and also life balance wise, so that they need me as a consultant, or they want me there because we've become friends and they appreciate working together to build that program.
Awesome. Awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is obviously you're customizing it, but you're also forming that bond that goes well beyond just the training itself, which is so critical. Most people miss.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Anybody can get any jerk can get the app is $9.99. I'll just use that. Great. Have fun, man. And that's how I got into V by Life Beam with artificial intelligence. Was The project came along from a friend and a writer of mine. He kind of brought me in. He's a optical engineer, and he just brought me in. He thought I would be a good fit, and I'm like, man, this is perfect, because now you have an app, you have a hardware, but it's able to actually coach the person. And that was the entry into that. It was just happenstance. I mean, if you play the game with skill, good luck could happen. That's how it was. It just kind of fell in my lap. I stopped looking for stuff like that maybe 6 months before. But it's hard. The same thing in business, man. I mean, I was not looking to move. I wasn't. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to learn Italian. I spent 2 years learning Italian. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to Italy and learn from the best cycling coaches I can get a mentorship with. And I had all the stuff lined up, and just something didn't sit right. My business in the States was not doing well. I had actually had in October of the year of 2000 and I think I came 2012. So October that year, I had the electricity shut off in August and again in October because I couldn't pay the bill. I had 2 roommates, and I was short. I was one of the things, like my roommates know, I was honest with them. I'm like, look, we have to choose which bill not to pay because I don't have it. And we just happened to wait a little bit too long for electricity. I canceled that
precedence on that one. I want to know.
Oh man, water went after that, man. It was much less, but water went.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking to move. I was looking to come and mentor, and just something didn't sit right. I had 2 conversations, one with each of the coaches, and it just felt like they were doing the people who set us up a big favor. Like one of them's like, because I asked him like accommodations, what am I doing? He's like, hey, don't worry about it. You come and we'll figure it out. I'm like, I'm going to be there for a year, man. Like, I don't want to figure it out and be stuck with like a bike. And, I'm not looking to live the $10 a day by Phil Gaiman Pro as an understudy. And it was just a matter of, it fell in my lap and then it fell apart. It literally fell apart. Mm-hmm. Literally. Like I came over, I had talked with, I won't mention her name because she's still involved here, but I spoke to the president of X Federation. We need a coach for the cadets, and it pays about 4,000, 5,000 shekels a month. It's not a living wage, but you'll still have time to do other stuff and personal coaching. Came and met with her. How's your Hebrew? Like I said, I don't really know that much. Well, you're working with kids. Yes, but we talked about this. And then long story short, she got voted out. So I didn't have a job. I came and I had nothing, man. And then the Ministry of Sport wouldn't recognize my certifications from the States. So literally rug pulled out. And it was just a matter of like, I love what I do. Let's figure this out. I wound up, it was tough, man.
Yeah. Talk about being the author of your own story. I mean, you've had so many things thrown in your face and walls put up in front of you, yet you kept marching on. And I think a lot of people would just throw their hands up in the air and just be like, all right, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just going to go work at Starbucks, call it a day. And I'm not going to deal with this BS anymore. Right. And I'm sure you've gone there mentally a few times. We all have, right.
Yeah.
And going through it. So tell me now where you're at. I mean, I happen to know some of the details. So, as far
I don't know
as
if there's,
is there married?
Yes, recently married. It's been an interesting couple months. Literally a month and 3 days before the wedding, the tax authorities here froze my account. So we had no money. I had hired who turns out to be a bookkeeper. And look, the blame is always on you, and I accepted it. It took me. My wife will tell you, it took me a good 2 or 3 days to recognize it was my fault because I need to know this stuff. And I did. Like, I knew the little voice inside of me is like, hey, stupid. But recently married the night before the wedding. We went out with my best friend and his parents who came in. They flew in from Philly, and my scooter was stolen. So, I mean, we're talking about like, and it's still going on, man, to be honest. Like, I feel like I'm sitting in the turf for the Navy SEALs in Hell Week and just getting tumbled over and over again. And the thing that's kept me going is I've been very fortunate to come in with a group of really great professionals. My wife has been amazing. Like, there's no way around it. I said to my dad 3 days after the wedding, I was like, with all the crap that's going on, I married the right person, man. Like, and I'm not, the last couple of weeks have been tough. I'm not dealing with it so well personally. It's been really tough. As you can hear my voice change, still emotional, and that's part of it. And a lot of it is, it begins and ends with us. And like I said at the beginning, when we spoke about, I was consistent, and we are what we consistently do. That's what it is. You want the 6-pack abs? They're made in the kitchen, man. And our kitchen right now sucks, but it's a matter of figuring it out. What can you eat? Okay, let's eat raw. What are you following? Whatever my kitchen will allow me to do. How's your business? What's going on with your business? Whatever I can do. So part of it's planning, mapping out, but also expecting the unexpected, which I kind of forgot because things had been going so well. I'm like, oh, all right, we have the wedding and I have this much in savings and we'll be able to do this and that. And then, you see what happened was, so it's tough. And I think that our bodies, and I was taught this early by a mentor, Dr. Joel Alkoff, may he rest in peace, my first powerlifting coach, my first ever coach. We are what we consistently do. And it's a matter of figuring out what's the one small thing that will allow you to have those results. And we all like to think that we have it figured out, and we don't. And, I used to laugh at him. He's like, when you turn 40, you'll figure out that none of the adults at that age knew what the hell they were doing either. Because I was like, I'm 23. I don't know. I got offered a job, but it's not enough. And to live off of, I have to live with 5 people in a 4-bedroom apartment in DC if I want to live there. And we're all figuring it out, and we all have the perspective of the world of this is how the world works. I struggle some days where I'm like, this is strict justice. Someone runs a red light, they should get a giant ticket and 10 points. It doesn't always work that way. And it's figuring out, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And how am I going to accept that my perspective is not the true perspective? We all have a perspective in life, and they're all right. Just like everybody is different. That doesn't mean you're an evil person. It's okay. Like, shit's going to come back around. It's going to come back around. Karma's a, and it may not be this lifetime. Maybe it'll be next one, or maybe you're coming back and dishing it back out. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, and this is where I've been personally struggling, taking the time to meditate, and whether it's meditate with God or meditate with yourself or meditate with your thought, whatever it is. And Morgan Freeman has a show called The Story of God, and I watched it last Saturday, just happenstance. It was the only channel that had anything interesting on. And he looked at meditating, focusing on God or something else. And they actually show with the isotope, there's a certain area in the frontal cortex that changes. And you can say that there's also studies that show that about work, that show that about when you're thinking about your body, when you're thinking about food, all of these things change. It's a matter of where do you want to be and where are you going and what are you doing consistently? Are you being thankful? Are you being grateful? And for me, the last 3 days, no. That's the honest answer, man.
Yeah.
That's a lie. 3 days ago, I had the first online sale for the new program, but it's tough. And to author of your own story, man, whatever we want to happen, whatever we think about is what we're going to get. If you think I'm an awful partner right now, then guess what's going to happen? If you're like, I'm going through a tough time, but I know I'm better than that, or I know that what I'm doing is right and it will work out. I need to figure out what I'm not doing right, or maybe you're doing everything right and it's just time. But where the focus glows, the energy flows. I mean, what's your experience? You've been in the industry and you're running a number of businesses. What have you seen with the people you've mentored and your own story? How has that played out for you?
Great question. So I agree. First of all, I agree with you. Thoughts are things. And I resisted that for so long. And I say resisted because I truly resisted it, but thoughts are things. And, the analogy I use when I'm coaching or teaching it is talking about the car, right? We've all had that where we've wanted a car that no one else has. For me, more recently, I've this customized Sprinter van that I've taken my family around, and they were never, anywhere, right? No one had one, a couple people online, but they just didn't exist. And as soon as I set my focus on that van, all of a sudden they started appearing everywhere. It's like, what the heck? Sprinter vans left and right. And it was like someone was having a clearance sale on Sprinter vans. But what was happening, we've all had this, right? The red sports car or whatever in our life. A client of mine was a Toyota black pickup truck. The point is when we start focusing on something, we start seeing it. We get the results of what we focus on. And so the same could be said around positivity. So gratefulness, being in a state of being grateful. And I know I hear this from a lot of people. Doug, I have nothing to be grateful for. My wife left me and I lost my job. well, there's somebody else that doesn't have arms, legs, that's dying of, of a disease or whatever it may be. We can find those things to be grateful for and exercise those. And again, I'm obviously going through this very quickly, but we get what we focus on, and that goes with our language too. And, I think a lot of people think that personal development, and I think it's all personal, right? Everything, if I'm coaching you, you still have to personally do the work. But when it comes down to it, it's a practice. And, you don't go to the gym one day and expect to get ripped and stay that way. No, you go consistently, as you said earlier, and you do it regularly. You said something that was very poignant. And you said, look, I'm not the fastest or strongest, but I'm consistent. And that goes the same with our thoughts. And being, as it's been said, is be the gardener of your own thoughts and make sure you're pulling the weeds out.
It's hard, man. That's always been my struggle, especially because I was picked on so much. You getting the parents say one thing, your close friends say another, and then you're hearing all this other noise. And that's always been my struggle. I mean, that's what it comes down to as a business owner as well. Like I've had people tell me since year 3 that I was actually a personal trainer. Like I've been writing training plans since I was 12, 13 for my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually started training. Karen Kern was her name. And she gave me Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield.
Yep.
And she introduced me to Seth Godin way back before he was big. Way back. We're talking 2008. And I just, who the F am I? Who wants to hear what I have to say? And our inner voice and our inner critic, I'm getting goosebumps because I'm just thinking just bad days. And a book that's helped me, whether you're religious or not, is called The Garden of Gratitude and The Garden of Emunah by Rabbi Shalom Arush. It's written with non-denomination in mind, but it's essentially practicing gratitude. And I go back to it. There's another book by him or his understudy or his disciple, Rabbi Menachem Brodie, no relationship, 6 Days to the Top. And it's talking about how to find your passion. There's another book written by a friend of our family who happens to be a very well-known psychiatrist called Without a Job, Who Am I? And his name is Dr. Abraham Tversky, very well-known addiction psychiatrist. And that's been my struggle. I mean, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, I posted in the Fit Accelerator a week and a half ago about Without a Job, Who Am I? And one of the more tenured responded and said, I think there's 2 types of entrepreneurs in the world, ones that are going through it and ones that will.
Mm-hmm.
And we tie so much. I know that I do. And my wife has recognized that early in our relationship, which I'm very, very lucky for. You find the worst one before and then you find the right one.
Yep.
But a lot of it is we're so tied, especially when we take on these passion projects. It ties into who we are at our soul. And nowadays, at least getting away from Americana a bit and being abroad, I see best friends are being torn apart over stupid stuff. Like really stupid stuff, like it's going to pass. And we get so caught up on the here and now and what's happening right now, we lose the forest for the trees. My wife and I just started watching The Man in the Castle. I don't know if you're familiar with that Amazon original series.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
The first one, I'm a bit sensitive to it because I'm Jewish and I have a very, very emotional connection to it. I've been told I have an old soul. I proposed to my wife in Berlin and I had spots in the city where I'm like, wow, this feels like deja vu, not with her, just anyhow. We'll do that for another episode. But it's just such a mind twist to think about who are you, where you come from, and what is that one small thing that could change your life. And working on the ambulance as an EMT, I saw it. Dude shooting heroin, survives getting hit by a car, whereas someone goes out on the deck on the 3rd story to smoke on their birthday. The heroin addict makes it and you think there's no way in hell, and you show up, deck, it doesn't look that bad, and that's it. I kind of got away, the inner voice and the critic. And the point of that is we have to stay true to our inner passion, but we also have to be kind to ourselves. The worst voice you can have, the evil inclination, so to speak, if you want to get into that religious type stuff, our inner voice, it's not the fact that we disappointed ourselves or we failed ourselves. It's the fact that we beat ourselves down even more after. And that's where the problems are. And that's the problem with a lot of people on diets, working as an exercise physiologist for a bariatric clinic. And you've seen this, I'm sure, working with corporate wellness. The program's working, but it's not enough. But we should be doing this. But it's working. Why change that?
No, I agree with you completely. And I think, going back, you asked the question of like mindset, right? And I know you're going through a hard time, and that's not what we were originally going to talk about, but it's a fact, right? And we talk about being the author of your own story. And somebody who was much wiser than me was a spiritual teacher, was actually a client of mine, and told me something like, hey, look, give yourself a certain defined time to mourn, to be sorry for yourself, whatever it is. Go through it. But after that date, no more. And that's when you start practicing your, a gratitude journal. Write down the things, 20 things you're grateful for. Now, I personally practice mine in the shower. I'll take a shower. I'm thinking of it. I journal it as well, and making sure that you're on that path. Because, oftentimes we have these old stories like, from our childhood and things like that we carry around like a U-Haul truck of baggage. And we can see it in other people when they're telling their story. But oftentimes it takes us a couple exercises. So I'm going to leave you and the listeners with one that you can do, should you choose to, is write down the story. Actually write it down of what happened, right? What's been happening. You shared some of it with us, and man, like getting your scooter stolen, the taxes, but write down that story and write it the way you would tell it to a friend. And I'm going to give you the punchline to this exercise, because usually I'll do this with groups of people. And I won't tell them the second part, because otherwise, people tend to write the story differently if you know what I'm going to do at the end. And so typically what happens here is people are writing, let's say my business partner stole this money from me. He's evil. Like, people have been stealing from me my whole life, and I can't trust people. And the reason I can't trust people is, they go on to their story. So then what I'll have them do, and usually that story is about 2 to 3 pages handwritten, is I'll ask them to go back and highlight the undeniable facts, not what you felt, but the things, if you went to a court of law and it would be, nobody could deny it, right? So walk out of a restaurant, my scooter is gone. Okay, fact. Highlight that. What tends to happen for most people in a typical 2 to 3 page letter is they usually only have about 4 or 5 lines that are highlighted, if they're being honest. Now, and everybody's going to be honest with themselves. I usually have to go back over the papers and go, yeah, but so-and-so wronged me. Well, okay, but let's talk about, what's their side of it. Maybe they didn't wrong you in their eyes. Point being is, oftentimes we can let our stories run the show and play and run this undercurrent. And until we identify those and realize that we've made up most of it, that doesn't allow us to get without under it. Now, I'm not saying you're doing this by any means. I'm just, giving the listeners an idea of a tool that they could possibly use, and I know you're a very open-minded person, Menachem. And there's just so many little exercises I can see. And you and I have had the great fortune of talking a lot in the past and in recent years with the Fitness Accelerator, as you mentioned, which is a group both of us are involved in with the fitness industry. But that's one thing that the listeners can use, as well as possibly yourself. You might want to try it. I always like doing it. And even though I know the exercise, how it is, you write it, I still write it down. I'm like, son of a gun, Yeah. Yeah. And Byron Katie's The Work, I think, is phenomenal, what she does. It's actually a phenomenal practice, but like everything, it has to be done. And you have so many gifts. It's absolutely amazing. And it's an honor to know you. As we wrap up here and we kind of go in, and we've gone all over the place from travel to body and to fitness. If you were to leave the listeners with just 3 things to take away, that they could take away to help them move forward, what would those 3 things be?
Definitely, without a doubt, I have to start with what my dad told me a million freaking times when I was 10, 11, 12. It's not what happens to you, it's how you react. And that ties into exactly what you just said. Nothing has meaning to us until we give it. We're reading a book right now. My sisters actually gave us as a wedding present, called the 7 Principles of a Healthy Marriage or a Happy Marriage. I can't remember. I'll find the title and send it over. But interpretation. How do you interpret things? When someone says, it doesn't matter the tone necessarily, they're giving you information. So someone's allowed to be irked. And that's the second thing, is don't jump to conclusions and interpret things a certain way. I just posted on Facebook, actually, Key and Peele have a skit of misinterpreting text messages. Hey, been messaging you all day. Do you still want to go to the bar? Oh, Key's been messaging me. Sure, whatever. Sure, whatever. It doesn't matter to me, So don't give that interpretation. Always give the person a benefit of a doubt. So number 1, it's not what happens to you, it's how you react. Number 2 is don't give something an interpretation until you think about where the other person may be. And number 3, Something else my dad told me. I'm going to change it. Number 3, something else my dad told me. A lot of emotion tied to it. But how do you get a higher purity of gold? You put it through a hotter fire. And some people say you don't find out what you're truly capable of until you go through tough times. I can think of 2, and it's true. And that's kind of what's kept me going through. Now, the last thing is, we'll add a bonus one. The 4th one is you are what you do consistently. Stop and think. And that's been my problem the last 2 days. I mean, this conversation right now, hopefully the listeners get as much, but I'm like, I didn't stop and think. Stop and count to 5. It's really, even if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're taking a second to digest things. Our brain thinks faster than our mouth. So you can say something and you're like, ooh, shouldn't have said that. And I'm not talking about necessarily business partner or wife even, but count to 5. Sometimes saying, people are like, oh, I like presenting off the cuff. Well, you need to at least have a sticky or a card. So it's not what happens to you, it's how you react. Make sure that you're not interpreting things without giving a benefit of a doubt. You get a hotter or a higher purity of gold with a hotter fire. Those would be the big 3.
Cool. I like number 4 too. I'll take the bonus every time. Menachem, your dad sounds like a very wise man. So, and so are you, my friend. And it's been an honor to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.
At Author of Your Own Story, we believe in taking a holistic approach to your health, where you aren't just physically healthy, but your entire mind, body, and soul is operating at its most optimal level. To get started in creating holistic health, download our free holistic health checklist at authorofyourownstory.com/body-gift. And don't forget to be the author of your own story.